Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself. My name is Fiona, and I'm your Master of Ceremony in Brausc, Brawijaya Undergrad Student Conference today. In collaboration with the Japan Foundation, International Relations Department Universitas Brawijaya organizes the second Brawijaya Undergrad Student Conference, or Brausc. This event is open for all undergrad students from humanities and social sciences in all over Indonesia and Southeast Asia to submit their creative and indispensable insights on contemporary issues related to Japan. Entering the second year, Brawijaya Undergrad Student Conference discusses with the team on diversity, inclusion, and belonging in contemporary Japan. First of all, I would like to welcome the Honorable Mrs. Melly Noviriani S.Sos, MMMA, Head of the Department of International Department, Universitas Brawijaya, and then the Honorable Mrs. Misako Kono, Assistant Director who represents the Director General of the Japan Foundation Jakarta, and also the Honorable Mr. Professor Dr. Abdul Hakim, MSE, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Brawijaya. I would also like to thank all the participants for coming and participating in this event. And before we begin the BRO-SC officially, I would like to inform all the webinar participants to please kindly turn your camera on and use the virtual background that we have sent. And to start the main event, which I'm sure all of you have excitedly waited for, let us pray together so that this BRO-SC can go well. Praying begin. Amen. All right, guys. For the next agenda, let us sing the national anthem Indonesia Raya together. For the audiences, please stand in their respective places. For the next section, let us hear the opening speech delivered by the head of International Relations Study Program, the Honorable Mrs. Melly Noviriani S.Sos, MMMA. For Mrs. Melly, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Welcome to the second Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference 2023. We sincerely welcome the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Brawijaya, Professor Dr. Abdul Hakim, MSE, who is pleased to be present in this virtual room and open this conference. We also welcome the Assistant Director of Japan Foundation, Mrs. Misako Kono. Thank you for collaborating with us on this event. Welcome and thank you also to the speakers and moderators of the webinar sessions at this conference, Mr. Zen Saltman, Ibu Irza Kurunin, Bapak Himawan Pratama, Ibu Fitriana Puspita Dewi, PhD, Ibu Primadiana Yunita, and Bapak Niola Hestu Prayogo. And we also gladly welcome all the undergraduate students from all over Indonesia who participate in this conference. This conference has been held for 2 consecutive years by International Relations Undergraduate Program of Universitas Brawijaya in collaboration with the Japan Foundation to encourage undergraduate students to produce scientific papers with themes within the framework of relations and cooperation between Indonesia and Japan in particular, as well as dynamics in the Asian region in general. This year, the quality standard of the completed scientific paper has been raised compared to the previous year, and with the theme of diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the contemporary Japan, we collaborate with the International Relations Laboratory of Universitas Brawijaya, the Journal of Global Transformation of Universitas Brawijaya, and student journal management partners from several other universities to publish the best journal articles that will be discussed in panels at this conference. On behalf of the head of International Relations Undergraduate Program of Universitas Brawijaya, I hope this event will provide maximum benefits for all participants and the development of international relations studies, particularly in studies on the relations between Indonesia and Japan and the Asian region. We also hope that we can continue to organize this event in the following years by collaborating with more partners and involving more participants. If there are any shortcomings and limitations in organizing this event, I apologize in advance on behalf of the organizers. And thank you once again. Welcome again to the second Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference 2023. Have a fruitful series of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Melly, for the wonderful opening speech. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is speech from the Honorable Mrs. Misako Kono, Assistant Director of the Japan Foundation, Jakarta, who represents the Director General of the Japan Foundation, Jakarta. For Mrs. Misako, the time is all yours.
Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Salam hangat dari The Japan Foundation Jakarta. Perkenalkan, saya Misako Kono, Assistant Director of the Japan Foundation Jakarta. I am honored to be here today attending the student conference on behalf of the Director General Takashi Yuichi of the Japan Foundation Jakarta. As a cultural organization funded by the Japanese government to promote Japanese studies in Indonesia, we appreciate the Laboratory of International Relations Department, Universitas Brawijaya, for organizing a student conference recognizing the critical importance on raising awareness of the issues and environment surrounding the diversity, inclusion, and belonging in contemporary Japan. Now, in Japan, we are facing a number of challenges when it comes to promoting diversity and inclusion. Despite the reputation as an economically stable and technologically developed society, there are still significant gaps when it comes to providing equal opportunities and rights to all individuals, regardless of their background. However, I believe that events like this conference can help to create greater awareness and understanding of these issues and inspire us to take an action to promote diversity and inclusion not only in Japan, but also in Indonesia. Moreover, I believe that Japan can learn from the experiences of Indonesia and other countries in the region, which have made significant progress in promoting diversity and inclusion. By sharing best practices and lessons learned, we can work together to create a more inclusive and equitable society for all. In conclusion, I want to express my gratitude to the organizers of this event for providing us with the opportunity to come together and discuss these critical issues. I hope that our conversations today will inspire us all to take an action and work towards creating a more inclusive and welcoming society for all individuals, both in Indonesia and Japan. Thank you very much for this opportunity. That's all from myself.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sako, for the incredible speech. For all the participants, now we have the opening remarks from the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Brawijaya, the Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Hakim, MSE. For Mr. Hakim, will also open this webinar. Mr. Hakim, the time and screen are yours.
Baik, terima kasih. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Pertama-tama, marilah kita panjatkan selalu puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, karena pada pagi hari ini kita bisa sama-sama menghadiri seminar internasional yang dilaksanakan oleh Ketua Laboratorium Hubungan Internasional ISIP Universitas Brawijaya. Yang saya hormati Director of Japan Foundation, kalau nggak salah tadi namanya Ibu Kono ya. Arigato gozaimasu, Ibu Kono. Ya. Yang saya hormati Ketua Program Studi Hubungan Internasional ISIP UB, yang saya hormati dan saya apresiasi para pembicara, para sivitas akademika, dan hadirin semuanya, partisipan webinar internasional ini yang berbahagia. Sekali lagi puji syukur kita haturkan kehadirat Tuhan Yang Maha Kuasa, karena atas berkat dan rahmat-Nya lah kita semua bisa berkumpul di platform ini secara daring untuk mengikuti salah satu rangkaian kegiatan Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference dalam bentuk webinar internasional. Tahun ini merupakan tahun kedua pelaksanaan Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference yang dilaksanakan dengan tema Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging in Contemporary Japan. In recent years, discussion about diversity, inclusion, and belonging have become more prominent in many societies around the world. Japan, with its unique culture and history, is no exception. As a country that has experienced rapid change in its democratic and social structure, it is critical to examine the ways in which diversity and inclusion are understood in practices in contemporary Japan. This second BRA USC International Webinar brings together speakers and participants from Southeast Asia to engage in meaningful dialogue about these issues. It is my hope that this event will provide a platform for the exchange of knowledge, ideas, and experiences that can enrich our understanding of diversity, inclusion, and belonging in Japan and beyond. I would like to express my gratitude to Japan Foundation, Jurnal Transformasi Global, Jurnal Sentris, Laboratorium Hubungan Internasional, and all the organizers of this webinar for their hard work and dedication in putting this event together. It is through their effort that we are able to come together and engage in this important conversation. Demikian sambutan yang bisa saya sampaikan, dan dengan mengucap Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dengan resmi saya membuka Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference 2023. Terima kasih. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hakim, for the speech and official opening remarks. Now, a bit announcement before we go into the next section. I would like to inform all of the participants that the best question during the Q&A section next will get a special gift from us. So, be ready and prepare for your best question, guys. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to introduce our first moderator, which is Mrs. Prima Diana Yunita. But before we invite Ms. Nita into the virtual stage, I would like to inform again for all of the participants to kindly check your chat box where we have sent a link for presents. All right, back to Ms. Nita. She's a lecturer on Department of International Relations at Universitas Brawijaya, and she's also actively writing on economic development and trade issues. Her articles have been published on several journals, including Jurnal Global dan Strategis with the title Pemilihan Kazakhstan sebagai Mitra Kerjasama Cina dalam Sektor Energi Minyak tahun 2003 sampai 2010. And she also has published an article on IIS Universitas Gadjah Mada Journal with the title Implementasi Corporate Social Responsibility atau CSR sebagai instrumen alternatif dalam pembangunan negara. Such incredible and dedicated scholar, you should see. Now let us call our moderator. Mrs. Nita, are you here yet?
Yes.
All right, without any further to go, Ms. Nita, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Good morning, participants. I'm Prima Diana Yunita. I will be moderating at the first session in our webinar. I'm very pleased to see you here and welcome all of you to this webinar. It is with no doubt that we have an amazing lineup of speakers today. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker, Zen Raphael Saltman, affiliated with Nagoya University in Graduate School of International Development. He is currently a lecturer in Nanzan University, lecturing in several courses like Advanced English Communication, SDGs in Japan and abroad, and Oral Communication. Regarding his background, he also has several experiences as research assistant, teaching assistant, business English tutor, and other experiences. He was honored to represent the Republic of Ireland at the World Health Organization Division of the 62nd Harvard National Model United Nations. Our amazing speaker will give an interesting insight to us regarding Japan's way in facing uncertainty during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemics, from the socio-cultural context, government action, and their mechanism. Of course, this topic will give us many information as we can also learn and take lessons from how Japan's response helped curb the spread of this disease. Ladies and gentlemen, Please join me in welcoming Sir Zen Rafael Saltman.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, and I'm deeply honored to be a speaker at this event. Okay, so if it's okay with you, I would like to share my screen. Okay, is my screen visible? Yes, okay, fantastic. Okay, so yes, my name is Zen Saltman. I am a Japanese American Hafu. You will learn more about Hafu in another speaker's presentation shortly. And I am currently a political scientist, a researcher at the Graduate School of International Development at LabHI University. I am a second-year PhD student studying conspiracy theory belief in Japan and its effect on political participation. However, for today's lecture or presentation, I would like to step back a bit and kind of give a more general overview of Japan's response during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, which started back in 2020. So my title is Facing Uncertainty, Lessons from Japan during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here's a very brief outline of my presentation. First, I'm going to introduce the statistics, the data, mortality and infection rate in the country. Second, I'm going to highlight some of the successful operations which Japan conducted, followed by maybe some of the mistakes and things that they could have done better. And finally, I'm going to conclude this presentation with my own personal thoughts on the situation. Hindsight is 2020, and I have much to offer. So let's begin. Okay, so just at a cursory glance, Japan fared quite well during the early stages of the pandemic. Over on the right, you can see the G7 countries, and even up until now, Japan only has a death rate or mortality rate of 73,000 people, but that is 0.3% of those who are infected. And relative to places like the United States and United Kingdom, this is considered a success story. So what then is Japan's secret? Okay, so yes, first I would like to mention that when the virus began spreading in early 2020, Japan was very slow to close their borders. Their first case was reported actually mid-January, but they didn't actually close their borders until nearly 2 months afterwards on March 9th. Yet despite Japan's slow initial response, the country has managed to curb the spread of the virus with moderate success. So what did we do right? Okay, so the first thing I would like to talk about is Japan's public health implementation. Japan in the early stages placed medical experts in the front and center. So perhaps one of the greatest contributions to this success is the guidelines that were provided by medical experts, panelists, a panel consisting of medical experts. On the right, you can see this kind of a field guide that was written up in 2020 by a list of experts who kind of gave suggestions on how Japan should respond and move forward during these uncertain times. Remember, back in 2020, we knew almost next to nothing about the virus. So there was a lot of uncertainty, right? Everything was up in the air. So I think it's no secret that Japanese citizens have very low trust in the central government. The approval rate has been quite low. Just to illustrate this point, there were 2 changes in the head of state, the prime minister, right, since the COVID pandemic. But despite this, there has been a very positive response to medical expert recommendations. So what exactly did the experts do and say? So I would like to highlight 2 points. First is this thing called a cluster-based approach. And second is the 3 Cs. Okay, so first, tracking COVID-19 clusters. So when the virus was yet kind of contained within smaller clusters, families, isolated communities, right? Japanese epidemiologists found success in implementing what they call the cluster-based approach. And what this really is that they track down the infected individual, and then they search all of their close contacts, and then track down their behavior and where they were going, and essentially by being more aware of where they were coming, where the virus originated and the motion of the people who were infected, they were able to keep the infection within these localized areas before it spread out to the greater community. And this, combined with what is now called the 3 Cs, I believe were integral, right, important to Japan's success. So during the early stages of the pandemic, and even today, experts recommend that the public avoid the 3 Cs, right? So on the right, you can see an image, it's a poster. You'll see it all over Japan, in schools, in businesses, in any public space really. English, even Bahasa Indonesian, I've seen, Japanese. So the first is closed spaces with poor ventilation, avoid closed spaces. Second, right, avoid crowded places. And third, avoid close contact settings. So, speaking with a group of friends without your mask on within 1 meter of each other, right? And these recommendations were promoted heavily at both the national and local levels and aided in curbing the initial spread. So for instance, the governor of Tokyo, Yuriko Koike, really kind of put this message into practice. So during her press conferences, she was always masked, right? She made sure to maintain social distancing. And through these examples, I think the Japanese populace was also able to feel more inspired to engage. Okay. Now, of course, you cannot just have these expert recommendations, right? These recommendations on their own wouldn't really amount to much. So this is where I believe Japan's unique culture comes in. So the mechanism to implement expert recommendations can in large part be attributed to Japanese cultural norms. And I'd like to highlight 2 of them here. So the first is masking culture. So you see the image on the right, and you'll notice that everybody in that photo is masked. And in fact, here's my mask. As soon as I'm done with this seminar, I'm going to put on this mask when I step out of the office. So Japan already had a pre-existing masking culture prior to the pandemic. It's not uncommon for us to wear masks when we feel sick, or because, for example, right now it's pollen season, so many people wear masks to prevent allergies. So it was quite easy when we were asked by experts to put on our masks for us to do so, right? Think of places like the United States where there was a lot of resistance to this idea. And next, I know this may sound like a negative thing, but in this case, it was actually quite positive, and that's Japan's culture of shame avoidance. So shame avoidance culture essentially means that people are more likely to collectively engage in practices, even though they personally may not see any merit or any reason behind it, because they don't want to stand out. And there's a very famous Japanese saying, right, that translated into English, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So when we're talking about pandemic response, this mentality, right, this collective mentality really benefited national efforts. And I just want to very quickly mention the vaccine rollout. I know there's a lot of text here, but it's not really part of the early pandemic response, but I thought it kind of illustrated the 2 aforementioned points of trusted medical experts and cultural norms. So even though Japan had a very slow response, and they only acquired sufficient vaccines until 4 years after many countries, once the rollout program was implemented, it very quickly became one of the highest vaccinated countries in the world. and nearly 80% of the population right now has received at least 2 shots. Okay, so this combined with Japan's universal healthcare system meant that every resident was eventually able to access one of multiple COVID-19 vaccines for free. Okay, next, political landscape. Okay, so I'm sure those who are studying Japanese politics, right, are aware of Japan's high political cohesion. And I believe that this resulted in seamless policy development. So while Japan does contain multiple opposition parties, the incumbent Jiminshito, the LDP, and its coalition has been dominant throughout the pandemic and has been met with little opposition. So on the graphic on the right, you can see the dark green and the pink. That is the Japanese incumbent party members. And as you can see, they make up more than majority of both the upper and lower houses. So this allowed for smooth implementation of pandemic containment measures at the national and local level. And this also includes multiple state of emergencies, which I would just like to note, they were not actually mandates by the government, but more recommendations. But I think this illustrates just how effective this development is. Okay, so moving on to the second part. So while you can say Japan has been quite successful, especially in the early stages in containing the virus, I think there's still quite a bit that we can improve on, or we could have done differently. Okay, so in fact, I think there are multiple actions which have greatly hampered containment measures. And I would also kind of like conclude on a personal note as somebody with a mixed heritage, Japanese American, the country's unjust treatment of its migrant population during the pandemic in relation to the closing of borders. Okay, so first, I think one thing that Japan could have done better was with, especially throughout the duration, so not just in the early stages, but part way, is the Japanese government started sending mixed messages. So obviously the Japanese government is very worried about the economy, which took quite a hit during the pandemic. And as a response to this, they tried to encourage people to go out and travel and spend their money. Now that seems perfectly rational from an economic standpoint, but unfortunately, when you're fighting a pandemic, this is really not something you want to do. So for example, they started something called the Go To Travel campaign, where they encouraged Japanese citizens to go out to places that were really hit severely by the pandemic, out into the countryside and into these beautiful places that kind of relied on the tourism industry in order to revitalize these local economies, right? But however, this really kind of clashed with medical expert recommendations. And they also did other things like limiting business hours so that it meant businesses stayed open, but within a smaller window, right? So instead of like being open from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m., they're open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And this, okay, and this unfortunately just worsened the situation when it came to clusters and close contact. And finally, there was an instance of Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which became quite controversial. So of course, the International Olympic Committee was quite stringent, was quite relentless in allowing Japan to compromise and back out of the Olympics. And this resulted in the government kind of having to push through with it, despite a lot of resistance. Okay, so part of this resistance came from the medical experts who strongly recommended against the Tokyo Olympics, as well as the Go To Travel campaign. And this kind of illustrates this clash of politicians versus medical experts. Unfortunately, though, the government has its interests as well. And as a result, they slowly try to kind of put the medical experts in the back and introduce other experts from other fields to kind of give a more, I would say, favorable voice to what the government wanted to achieve. Now, of course, I sympathize with what the government is trying to achieve, because we do not live in a bubble where we can forego all thoughts of the economy and society in favor of containing this pandemic, right? It's a very hard balance. And finally, there's this, what I consider tone-deaf policies. So, and again, an example of this is hosting the Olympics despite very, very strong public disapproval. So the majority of citizens in Japan actually wanted the games to be canceled or postponed until the situation improved. But as I mentioned before, their hands were tied because of, well, the contract that they signed with the International Olympic Committee. So the government kind of went ahead with this. And I think this kind of connects to this bigger discussion of there not being a viable opposition party, which results in a political system that is quite, unfortunately, unresponsive to public opinion. And in a greater sense, this has kind of eroded the government's accountability to the will of the people. Okay. And finally, this cultural norm, which greatly benefited pandemic response, could also be seen as a double-edged sword. And what I mean by this is that while Japan was very willing to act collectively, I also feel that Japanese culture is very, very wary, and they're very careful when they're implementing change. So they're quite conservative. So this, for example, manifests in the case of the pandemic, where schools and companies were very hesitant to adopt telecommunication while many other countries embraced it. And as a result, schools remained largely open and face-to-face, as you can see on the image on the right. And remote work was quite short-lived and wasn't universally adopted by companies across Japan. Okay. So as an aside, I also kind of wanted to talk about Japan's unjust immigration policies. Now, this wasn't something that hampered the spread per se, but I believe it is quite relevant to the greater topic that we're going to be discussing today. So while Japan was slow to close their borders, once they did so, they went to what I believe is quite extreme measures. So citizens were allowed to freely enter and exit Japan, but foreign residents were barred from entering the country, right? So Japanese citizens could enter and exit as long as they respected the proper conditions, quarantining, testing, things like that. But this did not extend to foreign residents, even permanent residents. So this ended up being quite devastating to a lot of family of Japanese nationals, students, and foreign students and workers who had to enter the country for whatever reason, for work or studying, or because maybe they needed to go back home for whatever reason, but they were afraid to do so because they knew they wouldn't be able to re-enter Japan, right? So these same entry requirements, in my opinion, should be applied to its permanent residents and its citizens, since the virus itself does not actually discriminate. It doesn't care, right? It doesn't care if you're Japanese, not Japanese. It's going to infect you regardless. Okay, so just as a brief summary, so what can we learn from the Japanese case? These are kind of like the 6 main points that I took from this experience. The first is that the good, right? Japan has high trust in medical experts. And I think this was crucial, right? This was incredibly important when we're talking about pandemic response. And not only was there high trust, but the experts themselves were quite clear on what they expected from their citizens. While countries like the United States had the CDC kind of wavering back and forth between like what you should and shouldn't do, like put your mask on, take it off, put your mask on. I believe that Japanese medical experts kind of handled this situation quite well. All right. Second, the cultural norms that compelled collective action. I'm quite proud as a Japanese, right, that when it comes time to do things collectively as a society, we tend to come together and push through. And finally, perhaps this isn't really a merit per se, but something that just happened to work out in our favor, is the high political cohesion in our government. Okay, and on the negative side, first, I would like to emphasize my final point, which is strict border control measures, which resulted in unfair treatment of migrants, in my opinion. And second, the mixed messages that created a lot of uncertainty and confusion among the populace. And finally, connected to this, the tone-deaf policies that didn't really reflect the will of the people. Okay, so here's my concluding remark and my personal thoughts. So of course, as they say, hindsight is 2020. And like with other countries, Japan's pandemic response could have been better, right? I mean, every country messed up. And frankly, Japan is actually one of the more successful stories, right? So I hope that other countries can observe our actions and kind of learn from both our successes and mistakes. And now for my personal take, right? Again, there's little doubt that Japan's early pandemic response was largely successful, but the situation could have been better had they been more receptive to public opinion, right? In addition, I believe their treatment of migrant populace highlights a deeper underlying challenge, which is how will Japan as a country evolve in the face of an ever globalizing reality, right? Because experts have made it quite clear, right? Virologists, epidemiologists, pandemics will likely become a much more common occurrence as the world continues to globalize. So then I understand it's very important to protect one's country in such uncertain times. We should always remember to uphold our values as humans, right? So as Japan steps into the diverse world of tomorrow, so too will its people. And I believe that an inclusive attitude that considers the needs and wants of all of its residents is paramount for a flourishing society. Okay, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zen Rafael Saltman, for the insightful knowledge. Some of the point that I note from Mr. Zen is we know that despite citizens' low trust in the central government, people were responsive to what medical experts said. For example, the 3 C's. However, there were some failures too, like tone-deaf policies during Japan 2020 Tokyo Olympics and unjust immigration policies. Okay, now we are gonna to our second speaker, is Irza Kurunin, SIPMA. Miss Irza Kurunin, SIPMA, she is currently working as a lecturer in Universitas Brawijaya, specifically mastering in migration. Migration is one of the topics she is an expert in. Therefore, she will be guiding us all today in the discussion about Japan's migration. We know that migration has been a part of human history for thousands of years, and Asia has a long and complex history of migration, influenced by factors such as economic opportunities, political instability, cultural exchange, and colonialism. This presentation will be discussed about the brief history of migration in Asia, current trends of migration in Asia, implication of migration in Asia, and case study by using example of migration in Japan. Today, Japan remains a major receiving country for migrants, with many coming to work in industries such as manufacturing, construction, and healthcare. However, there are also ongoing debates and discussion about how to effectively integrate migrants into Japanese society and ensure their right and well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Irza Kurunin.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Nita, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Irza, and I'm a lecturer in the Department of International Relations. And I'm honored to be here to share with you my thoughts on the migration in Asia, as Mbak Nita told before. Well, in the next about 20 minutes, I will be discussing a changing pattern of migration in Asia, trends and implications. Well, I believe that topic of migration is important because Asia is home for more than half of world population and also the biggest number of outgoing migrants. So without further ado, let's begin. Please go forward. Well, this is Asia population. Asia population is equivalent to almost 60% of the total world population, and Asia, the origin of over 40% of the world's international migrants in 2020. It means around 115 million people from Asia are migrants. And please go further. This topic, okay. This is our main topic today about the overview, current trends in migration, and then the implication and case study. For the case study, I put Japan as interesting case on migration context, including the skilled labor and the Nikkei migrants. And next, we'll see the historical overview. Well, there is a long history of migration in Asia from ancient times, colonialism, World War II, post-World War until these contemporary times. And each period has a significant impact on migration. But if we go to the salient moment in ancient times, for example, is the movement of people from Central Asia to the other part of the continent. And one of the biggest moment is the Silk Road. The Silk Road is a network of trade routes that connected China with the Mediterranean, and it facilitated the movement of people and as well as goods across Asia. And for these contemporary times, today, migration in Asia continues to be driven of variety of factors, including economic opportunities, family reunification, and also political instability. Many countries in Asia have become both destinations and also source of migration. Okay, this is the changing pattern of migration in Asia. If we talking about how the pattern changed about migration in Asia, the first of all is the from rural to urban migration, and then from permanent to temporary migration. Well, in the past, many migrants moved to other countries with the intention to stay permanently. However, in recent years, there has been an increase in temporary migration, particularly of the labor migrants. And the third the changing pattern is from intra-regional to extra-regional migration. In recent years, there has been an increase in migration to from Asia to other regions outside Asia, such as North America, Europe, and also Australia. And the fourth is from low-skilled to high-skilled migration. This includes migration on professional in fields such as engineering, medicine, and also information technology. And the last is from permanent settlement to circular migration. Circular migration is where migrants move back and forth between their home country and the country where they are working. Okay, moving on. Next. This is, there are several major factors that have influenced migration patterns in Asia, includes economic opportunities like higher paying jobs, better living standards, and improved economic prospects. And then also political instability, for example, the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar that pushed people from Myanmar to go to the other country to get the better condition for their living standard. And the demographic change, such as aging population. Asia's demographic change, such as aging populations and the declining of birth rates, have also influenced migration patterns in Asia. Some countries in Asia, such as Japan, they need to attract skilled foreign workers to help fulfill their labor shortage. and family reunification, and also the globalization, of course, the increase of interconnectedness around the world, and then the improvement of the transportation and communication technologies, and also the growth of international trade and investment has created new opportunities for migration. Okay, next we move to the following info. Yes, this is the current trends of migration in Asia. Asia and Pacific are the region with the highest number of outgoing migrants, whereas the USA is the top destination country for migrants. And there is an increase. Well, okay, there is an increased number of outgoing migrants between 2015 and 2020. And the next, please, is the information about the top. Please go to the next slide. Well, this is the top 20 sources of migrants from Asia and Pacific, and India is the country with the highest number of outgoing migrants. And also India, they experienced the most significant increase of outgoing migration for the last 2 decades, only in the 20 years. So many increasing of the outgoing migrants. Furthermore, there are also PRC, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Philippines for labor migration, and also there is Afghanistan due to a conflict, and they are looking for asylum. And then also Indonesia for mostly for unskilled migrant workers, Kazakhstan, Myanmar, particularly Rohingya people, and also Vietnam for labor migration. That is the top 20 sources of migrants from Asia and in the Pacific to around the world. Well, next, let's take a look on this. On this diagram, Saudi Arabia, and then Malaysia, South Korea, and also Thailand are the example of host countries for migrant workers, particularly in low-skilled workers. But in the other hand, we can look at the Japan. Japan accepts skilled workers. We will talk later about Japan, but one factor that makes Japan only have limited number of unskilled workers, because Japanese people and the government believe that wives' responsibilities typically include taking care of home of a domestic worker is the wife responsibility. So, however, these norms changed slightly, but still happen until now. Okay, please go forward. Well, this is the economic implication from migrants in Asia. Overall, the changing pattern of migration in Asia has a significant implication for a range of economic, political, demographic, and also an international relations issue. Remittances, of course, in 2020, Asia received the largest amount of remittance in the world, accounting for over half of the global in total. And of course, for the labor market, migration can help to fill the gaps in the labor market. And the third is economic growth. Remittances from migrants to the home countries can provide a significant source of foreign exchange in receiving countries, and it can increase productivity and expand the workforce. Okay, please, the next. Well, the other economic implication is brain drain. Brain drain is where the many smart and skilled citizens leave their home countries to work abroad, and then it will be a loss for the country of origin. Why? Because a country needs smart and skilled citizens to grow their economic development, and brain drain is a negative impact from home countries, but gives the benefit from host countries. Indonesia, for example, many skilled workers from Indonesia decided to move to Singapore for earn more wages and a better life, as well as India, Philippines, China, and also Pakistan. And the last implication in economic is social welfare system, because migrants may require access to social services such as health and education, which can place a strain on this system. Okay, please next. Well, the other implication beyond the economic implication is social impact, and then political impact, demographic impact, and also international relations, such as issues such as border control, labor rights, well, for example, between Indonesia and Malaysia, or between Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, talking about migrant protection and migration can also impact diplomatic relations between countries. Okay, well, next. Okay, let's the case study about Japan. Here are some of the main characteristics of immigration in Japan. The first is limited number of foreign residents. According to the Ministry of Justice, as of 2020, there were about 3 million foreign residents in Japan, which represent only about 2% of the total population. It's very low. And the second, skewed toward low-skilled labor, very strict in receiving low-skilled labor. And the third, the highly regulated immigration system and concentrated in only urban areas such as Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. Well, next, let's take a look on please this diagram about foreign workers in Japan, more than tripled since 2008. However, 2% is limited, but there is a rapid changing if we compare to the a decade ago, about in 2008. There is a rapid changing in the number of foreign workers in Japan, and Japan has increased its efforts to attract foreign workers since the Japanese population is aging rapidly. And the Japanese government is feeling that they need to bring in talent from abroad to fulfill the labor shortage. For example, ISEC in Indonesia, they have a program called Global Talent, if I'm not mistaken, for the name of the program. And that program attracts the student to intern in Japan. Okay, please, next. Well, through this table, it depicts the number of foreign residents by nationality in Japan. About half of Japan's foreign workers come from Vietnam and China. However, some scholars said they expected the number of immigrants from lower income countries such as Cambodia, Myanmar to rise quickly in the next 2 decades. And in the fifth row, you can see there is Brazil. Brazilian came to Japan, has a long history, and most of them are called Nikkei-jin. Well, we can go further. Nikkei-jin, some scholars argue that Japanese people and government believe that racial purity and homogeneity shape their national identity, even though this belief has changed slightly but still exists. And they think how important being a Japanese people, even though they are living abroad. So the government still think that this Nikkei-jin, people who descended from the Japanese people, deserve this special immigration status. So there were many number of Nikkei from Brazil, Peru, USA that came to Japan. Nikkei in Brazil has a long historical background. So there is Japanese people. There is Japanese people in Brazil as well as in USA, Peru, and other South American countries. We can see to the next slide. Well, so from the immigration communities, from the Nikkei people, this is the impact of migration wave toward Japan on cultural aspect. At least 4 points that I could say in the cultural aspect affected by migration flows: foods, language, festivals, and religions, such as Christianity, Muslim, communities are growing in Japan. Why there is a change in the wave of immigration in Japan? One of the most influential factors is the Japan government policy. Please go ahead. This 2018 immigration reform is to attract foreign workers to fulfill labor shortage in Japan due to Japan's aging population and the decrease of the birth rate. And the 2018 immigration reform was a significant shift for Japan, which historically had strict immigration policies in the past and relatively low number of foreign residents, but Japanese government still tried to change their policy, particularly to fulfill the labor shortage and to bring the economic growth for Japan. Okay, well, please, next. Yep. Some predictions say that Japan must quadruple foreign workers by 2040 to meet growth target. If they cannot do that, maybe they cannot meet the economic growth target. That is how immigration can boost the economic growth for the government or for the Japan. Okay, well, this is the conclusion for this presentation. As the committee remind me, my time is limited. Okay, well, in conclusion, the changing pattern of migration in Asia has been influenced by a range of factors, including economic globalization, political instability, and demographic shift. The second thing, Japan is one of the example on the changing pattern of migration. The issue of aging society in Japan is the biggest factors. Japan government changed the policy to increase foreign workers in Japan. However, we still need for policy change globally, according to migration, to improve the rights and protections of migrant workers, diaspora people, and so on, as well as addressing the social and cultural impacts of migration on both sending and receiving countries. Well, thank you very much for your attention, guys. I hope that you found the information and insight shared to be informative and helpful. Thank you, Mbak Nita. I back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Irza, for the very insightful presentation. Some point that I note from Ms. Irza is regarding migration in Asia. There is several things from its pattern. There are also major factors that drive migration to happen. It can be seen from economic opportunities, political stability, and other factors. In Japan, there is a 2018 immigration reform and the future of immigration. I think that's all from notes from Ms. Irza. All right, now we'll move to question and answer session. If you want to ask question for our first speaker and our second speaker, please raise your hand and say your name. Okay. Questions, please. Okay, we have Prani.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Actually, I found that both of the topics from the speakers are so interesting, and even though I am the committee here, but paying attention to the material, and I find it so interesting. And then I have like one specific question for both of the speakers. I really want to know about like how's the current situation of tourism today, as we know that the pandemic has slowly subsided these days, and I really want to know from both of the speakers' perspective if it's possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rani. Maybe next questions. Okay, Felicia, please.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Felicia Ian Rosalyn. I'm an international relations student from Brausc University. I have a question for both speakers regarding the migration policy of Japan to attract migrant workers to fulfill the labor shortage. So I see that Japan has been trying to improve its migration policy. Meanwhile, there's this social norm in Japan where people don't really like differences like the norms of collectivism, like what Mr. Zen has said earlier on his presentation. So do you think that this migrant policy can work well in the future, since there's this presence of this collectivism norm? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Felicia. Third questions. Okay. Maybe Mr. Zen or Ms. Irza can answer the question from Felicia or Rani.
Okay, if it's okay with you, maybe I could give a quick response to the first question.
Okay.
Both very interesting questions, by the way. So, I mean, I could just tell you, as somebody who's living here, tourism has been gradually picking up again. And case in point, Japan has actually lifted most of their very stringent, strict border control. And there actually is discussion, or they announced back in January that they're going to change the classification of COVID-19 to that of equivalent of the common cold, like seasonal influenza. And I think this kind of reflects Japan's willingness to kind of move into a post-pandemic world, in which I think they're very much looking forward to increasing tourism once again. So this year, if you can afford to travel, I'm sure Japan is going to be very welcoming of tourists.
Okay. Ms. Irza.
Okay, please could you repeat the question from the second question?
From Felicia, immigration policy, about immigration policy, Felicia, yeah.
Yes, sure, ma'am. So, okay, my question is, meanwhile, the Japanese government is trying to improve their migrant policy to attract migrant workers. Can this policy become successful in the future, since there's this collectivism norm where the Japan society doesn't really like differences? Like it's uncommon for them to see like maybe people from other countries with their differences like that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you. When maybe for the cultural aspect, Mr. Zen can explain. but I can briefly answer in my view in the economic aspect, and I think it will work because Japan has several agreements with the many countries, such as Indonesia. We have the government-to-government agreement according to the migrant labor. So many skilled workers such as nurse and then engineering go there to fulfill the labor shortage. And also the Japan government also has the newest policy regarding the wages. They increase the wages for the workers, not only foreign workers, but also all of the workers. Some maybe not for all companies, but such as Toyota, Honda, or several companies, international companies in Japan, they increase the wages, and I think it can attract foreign labor or foreign migrants to go to the Japan to fulfill the labor shortage. So in my opinion, this economic attract from the Japan government and also the policy regarding the G2G migration policy between Japan and around the countries, it can attract labor migrants, in my opinion. But when we talk about the culture, this maybe Pak Zen can tell me more how this cultural diversity in Japan will be more diverse, will be many population, Muslim, Christian, and so on, living in Japan. Well, that's my opinion. Thank you, Felicia.
For the first question tadi, first
Rani,
question from Rani, yes.
Rani only talking about tourism, right?
But for both of speaker.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you could explain from your perspective about that specific question. Maybe we can make like connecting dots about tourism and migration, maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, what Pak Zen said regarding the tourism, and Japan has opened their border for tourism. I think, well, that's really good for the tourism, and well, that's maybe that's only my opinion. Rani. Thank you, Rani.
Okay, Mr. Zen, have you answered the question from Felicia?
Yes, so I would like to answer that now.
A second question, yes.
Okay, and thank you, Ms. Urza, for covering the economic aspect. I'm actually not familiar with that at all. So, so this is my opinion, but I think the question that you bring up is very apt, actually, because it is going to be one of Japan's greatest challenges in the coming decades. So as you mentioned, Japan is very much a collective society, right? We call it a homogeneous society. It doesn't really account for diversity, unfortunately, right? Because of Japan's, in part because of its the fact that there's really only one major ethnic group and its unique history. But because of this, when I see policy implementations, in my opinion, these policies are created for short-term migrant workers. So we're talking about technical interns and other workers coming in just for a few years to kind of do what they have to do, and then they're rotated out and more people come in. And I don't think this is conducive to a truly multicultural society. And in my opinion, Japan has a long way to go before they actually truly adopt a globalized mindset. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zen. Maybe, is there any questions from the audience or participants? Please raise your hand and say your name. Okay. Okay. Miss Amalia Nurhandini, please.
Hi, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Zen. How are you? It's been a while. Yeah, actually, I studied together with Zen during my master's. So we are in the same graduate school. So it's nice to see you again after all these years. Okay, so I have a question regarding digitalization, actually, because I think you mentioned in your presentation that Japan, despite being a technologically advanced country, they are very slow in embracing digitalization, especially during the pandemic. So, what's your thought about this? I mean, like, because I think it's very different if we compare it to Indonesia, because in Indonesia, you know, when the pandemic happens, like everyone is going online. I mean, like, and there is no resistance about that. And schools also, we conducted everything online by using Zoom and also Google Classroom and Google Meet. So I just want to see how this actually happened in Japan at that time. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Miss Amaleni, the question just for Mr. Zen or also for Miss Irza?
Yeah, I think both of you can respond if you want to.
Okay. Mr. Zen first or Miss Irza, please. Oh, Mr. Zen. Okay, please,
Oh.
Mr. Zen.
Okay. Yeah, it's great seeing you after all these years, by the way. Yeah, we were batchmates at the same graduate school, masters. And thank you for the interesting question. So I'm by no means an expert in this domain, so I'll just give you my personal opinion. But I always found that quite interesting. So there's this misconception that Japan is a very technologically advanced country because we produce a lot of very technologically advanced gadgets and machines, right? And while that part is true, when we talk about Japanese technological infrastructure, in many ways, we're quite behind. So case in point, in Japan, we still use fax machines, while in other developed countries, you know, fax machines was something that was used 20, 30 years ago. And while I couldn't really pinpoint the reason, I think maybe from my guess, one of the reasons why this is the case is because Japan is incredibly bureaucratic, so it's actually quite difficult to implement change in any way. And so when you have all of these older policymakers and people who have been within the system for a long time, who are used to a certain kind of technology like fax machines, there really is no room for like people to then come in, you know, the younger generation and be like, here, we don't need to use fax machines. We can just use laptops and Zoom and everything. And as a result, you kind of see this strange contrast where like Japan is highly technologically advanced and at the same time they're incredibly behind in many ways. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zen. Okay, Miss Irza.
Regarding about the technology in Japan, I don't really understand. But well, for this in Indonesia, for example, we can say that so many in our daily life we use this technology that we need to make this technology become useful for us is the cooperation among us, among people, I mean, so that the robotic and the technology, it can be useful for us, not the enemy for us. I think I can say I couldn't say more about the technology, and in my opinion, Mbak Andini is more advanced more advanced in the knowledge about the technology, digital and something like that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zen and Miss Irza. Is there any questions from participants? No? Okay. Okay, I will conclude our discussion on this first session. In conclusion, there are a lot of things we can learn from Japan's way in managing pandemic, both from its failures and success. In current situation, Japan has done something to mark its effort to move to the post-pandemic situation. One of it to open tourism again, because Japan has open border. It also affected to its migration. Japan is very much a collective society, unfortunately, not really friendly for diversity. It is, of course, a challenge for Japan itself. Finally, I think we have reached the end of this session. I would like to say thank you for our presenter, Mr. Zen, Rafael Saltman, and Ms. Irza Kurunin for the great presentation, and to the audience for their active participation. And I go back to MC Fiona. Thank you, Mr. Zen and Ms. Irza.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zen and Mrs. Urza, for the insightful presentations. And also thank you for Ms. Nita for moderating our first section. Next, we will meet another impressive moderator, guys. But before we invite him to the virtual stage, I would like to inform all of the participants to kindly check your chat box below, where we have sent a link for presents. And also, a reminder again, the best questions during the next Q&A section will get a special gift from us. So again, guys, be ready and deliver your best question. All right, back to our moderator, which is Mr. Neola Hestu Prayogo. He is a lecturer in the Department of International Relations, Universitas Brawijaya, and he is also an academician who focuses on public diplomacy. He graduated his master's degree of international relations with concern in study of global trade diplomacy from Universitas Gadjah Mada, and currently doing his doctoral program at Central China Normal University. Now, please welcome Mr. Neo. Mr. Neo, are you here?
Yes, Fiona,
All
thank you.
right, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Respectable the head of International Relations Study Program, Ibu Meli Noviani SSMA, and respectable the director of Japan Foundation, Ms. Misako Kono, and the honorable all speaker in the second session, where Mrs. Fitriana Presidiati PhD and Mr. Himawan Putra, and the honorable all lecturers of International Relations Study Program, and the honorable all participants of this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Nola Supraiko. I'm the moderator of today's seminar for second session. I'm very pleased to see you here and welcome all of you to Brawijaya Undergraduate Student Conference 2023. Before the presentation begins, let me inform how the presentation will be going on. First, all speakers will be invited to present the material. After that, there will be question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, we have fantastic lineup of speakers today, and I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is a lecturer in the Japanese Literature Program, Faculty of Culture Studies, Universitas Brawijaya, specializing in modern Japanese literature. She received her doctoral program at Ritsumeikan University in 2022. Today, she will be speaking to us about hafu and ethnic minorities in Japan. This topic is particularly important because the topic of hafu, ethnic minorities in Japan, can shed light on how Japan can embrace diversity while preserving its unique culture, heritage, and it speak to the challenge and opportunity of building a more inclusive and equitable society in Japan and beyond. Since she has a wealth of knowledge and experience in Japanese art studies, we are truly fortunate to have her here with us today. Now, allow me to welcome the speaker, Ms. Fitriana Puspita Dewi, to deliver her presentation. Time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is my voice here. Can you hear my voice? Yes, sorry.
Yes,
okay. Yes. Okay, before I start, I'm going to apologize due to the error and glitch in my laptop, my camera laptop. I mostly will be off cam and sometimes turns it on briefly. I'm sorry. Okay, good morning, everyone. First, I want to say thanks for the International Relations Program, Faculty of Political and Social Science, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Fitriana. I'm a lecturer in Japanese Literature Program, Faculty of Culture Studies, University of Brawijaya. Today, I will talk about hafu and ethnic minorities in Japan. Can we start the PowerPoint? Okay. Okay, let's start from the terminology. Hafu is a word derived from English word half, which is used to address biethnic Japanese people. So Hafu means half-breed child or mixed breed child, half international child, double biethnic individual. Another term which carry historically pejorative connotation are ainoko or a child of mixture child. Another one is konketsuji or mixed blood child. And then there's another term called zainichi. They are descendants of Koreans who were brought to Japan because of colonialism and still live in Japan now. Another one is Nikkeijing or Nikkei. Is it a Brazilian Japanese mixed breed? So historically in 1790, 1920, a significant number of Japanese migrated to Brazil and working in coffee plantation there. And in the 18th, when Japan in dire need of unskilled labor to work in manufacturing industry, the Japanese government give order to the Japanese and their family member who is in Brazil to return to Japan for the purpose to fill the labor gap in Japan industry. Hafu is popular term used today. Hafu gained popularity on 90s as a trendy label that applied particularly to those considered phenotypically white. This means that even though Hafu literally means mixed blood between foreigner and Japanese, the use of this word tends to mean a mixture of Japanese and white or Westerner. As we maybe know, Japan is a homogeneous society. The four major ethnic groups categorized as other in Japan are Chinese ethnicity, Korean, Philippine, and Brazilian. Compared to this group, the white race is much less. The number of children born to Japanese non-white parents is far less than the number of mixed Japanese non-white children. But the term Hafu is more attached to the children of Japanese white. In Japan, Westerners are often admired or are the subjects of envy, akogare, as they symbolize modernity. This idealization of the West has its roots in Meiji period and in 1868 when modernization was introduced to Japan by Westerner. At the time, a Japanese intellectual named Fukuzawa Yukichi wrote the book called Theory of Civilization, in which is created a racial hierarchy. He claims that lighter-skinned people are civilized. Can you turn back? Still in the second page. I'm sorry, please back again. Yes, okay. He claims that lighter-skinned people are civilized, while darker skin is uncivilized. He also stated that the West is at the forefront of human civilization. While Meiji modernization brought Western nation to Japan, then after World War II, due to the American occupation in Japan, Japan experienced Americanization. Another historical approach is because Japan colonized China, Korea, and some part of Southeast Asia, the descendants from these countries are considered as subject or a minority in Japan. From this, it can be seen that the use of the term Hafu contains post-colonialism aspect. Okay, next. Now let's look at the job and career opportunities for non-Japanese people. For those who are white, especially here, Western, American, and British, work a lot in academic and media sectors. Most of them work as English teacher, university lecturer, or become celebrities. Meanwhile, most ethnic Chinese work as merchant or traders. There is the term sambado or three knives, namely cook, tailor, and butcher, showing the stereotype of work of the Chinese ethnicity. And then Zainichi, Korean Japanese. Zainichi were brought by force from Korea to Japan to become colonial laborers. They got the dirty, stinky from the kimchi smell stereotype. Most of them work as a pachinko parlor owners, sell yakiniku, or join Yakuza criminal organization. And then descendants from Philippines, ethnic group Philippine mostly work in entertainers sector. This is a euphemism for hostess or bar girls, but currently the Philippines working as caregivers. And then last for Nikkei, Brazilian Japanese, due to the Nikkei ethnicity coming to fill the labor gap, many of them work in factories or industry. Okay. Next, now let's focus on half Japanese media. In the left picture, The girls in the orange dress. This is Becky. It's her stage name. She is a half British Japanese. She debuted as voice actress for Pokemon. Also appeared on variety shows. And the right one is Jero, a half Japanese Afro-American. He is a famous enka singer, traditional Japanese song similar to dangdut in Indonesia. Many of the Hafu later become Hafu talents, Hafu talent or talents in the media. Next. Okay. They are often famous because their cultural, ethnic background. They bring the taste of West to Japan or impress sense of Japanese internationalism to the audience. However, there is the very acknowledgement of the uniqueness or the international quality of Hafu celebrities in Japan that signifies that they are set apart from an authentic Japaneseness. Further, foreign celebrities are symbolic that they appease the ideology of Japaneseness by speaking Japanese and conforming to Japanese cultural customs. Additionally, they fulfill the younger Japanese generation desire to become liberal Westerners while retaining Japaneseness, where although the celebrities are not ethnically Japanese, they speak the language and conform to Japanese culture, concludes that the effect is Japanese cultural nationalism with non-Japanese actor. But there is a paradox regards to Hafu celebrities. Although that they refer for unique taste of foreigners they bring to Japan, it is their very foreigners that sets them apart from the Japanese. They can never become more Japanese celebrities. Next. Okay, according to data house AIBA, this is Hafu talent database, great majority of Hafu media figures are Japanese Western. As shown in the graph, Western nationalities rank the highest with 77%, followed by ASEAN nationalities with 13%, Latin American with 5%, Middle Eastern 2%, Africa 1%, and Pacific 1%. For the breakdown, in Western nationalities, America ranked the highest with 37%, above all European nationalities. Because Japan admired Western as a symbol modernization, as previously stated, therefore the trend of Hafu media figures being mostly of Japanese and white person reveals that Japanese media willing to incorporate these nationalities in the creation of an image of the Hafu media figure as one who harbors both traits of Japan and the West. This may be reason why Japanese and white Hafu, who are often associated with wealth, power, cosmopolitanism, are the representative population for Hafu in media. Next. In Japanese media, there is overwhelmingly Hafu models since their physical figure are good, tend to be pretty and handsome and suitable as models. According to survey with Japanese university students, respondents said that the physical characteristics of Hafu in media such as cute, handsome, and pretty. In some cases, expression unique to the Japanese cultural context were used to describe the physical characteristics of Hafu, such as their face is well proportioned. Next. Okay, so sometimes they describe the physical characteristics such as their face is well proportioned, literally organized face, kauga totonoteiru, well-defined facial structure, nice style or good style, stairugai, which term elevate Japanese and white Hafu appearance from a normal Japanese appearance. This indirectly implies a sense of admiration for a Japanese and white Hafu appearance. In fact, in recent years, Hafu look has been trendy in Japan. There is no popular style for makeup for women called Hafu face makeup or Hafu gao meiku that tries to mimic a Japanese and white Hafu appearance by applying makeup in certain ways. For example, to make the eyes appear large and gorgeous, eyeshadow is applied in a particular way, often color contacts are worn, no shadow to define well-structured nose, a feature commonly associated with white appearance. Further, Hafu celebrities describes in terms their personality, such as strong individuality, koseiga tsuyoi, or bright, karui, and more outspoken, sunao. The general impression about Hafu in media were that Hafu are seen as linguistic ambiguous. They may speak only Japanese, not speak proper Japanese, may or may not speak English, and may be multilingual. And then they're admirably good looking and exhibit a non-Japanese personality. Okay, but hafu in media doesn't represent hafu in reality. Next. Okay, some of them feeling offended by the term hafu itself, which means they only considered as half Japanese. Some of them prefer to call double or mix. In fact, there are many children. Okay, in fact, there are many half children who do not speak English and are fluent in Japanese, but because their appearance is obviously foreign, many think they cannot speak Japanese and that they don't understand the Japanese culture. There are many cases of discrimination, such as the prohibition for foreigners to enter the onsen, public hotbed. In front of the onsen, usually written symbol Japanese only. Some children had to study English even harder to show their foreign side because Japanese people believe every people with obvious foreigners look must be can speak English or demanded to be can speak English. Therefore, hafu kids in Japan cannot run away from the fact that they always considered as a hafu, a half Japanese, not a whole, because they need to think to fulfill both sides and not be viewed as one. They see themselves as bionic because other people saw them as bionic. Sometimes to be acknowledged as a whole Japanese, they overcompensate in their Japaneseness, hiding their non-Japanese identity. Some children were constantly fearful that their foreign identities revealed in front of their Japanese peers. All of this pointed to general anxiety that bionic children living in the constantly having to monitor themselves to avoid drawing attention. On the social level, the primary reason for concern in maintaining Japanese homogeneity may be due to the fear that with increased diversity, there is likely to be dramatic change in Japanese cultural and lifestyle. Next. In conclusion, the first is from the term hafu itself, which represents that even though hafu lives are deeply integrated with Japanese culture, they are still seen as half Japanese. Secondly, the use of the word hafu, which tends to refer to Japanese or white person, does not only have impact on discrimination or segregation in the work sector to other ethnicities, but also represent post-colonialism in Japan. Lastly, regarding their identity, many have children who, in order to be recognized as full Japanese, tend to cover up their original ethnic identity or are forced to learn the language and culture of their original ethnicity because of social demands to show an international side, creating general anxiety to be fully accepted as Japanese. Okay, next. Lastly, due to the progress of globalization, Japan needs to learn to change. So to pick to the hafu life, some hafu have made introduction about hafu lives. For example, with the hafu talk pioneered by hafu in the Kansai area in the Japan west part of Japan, which is a place for discussion and getting to know about hafu. Another one is Hafu, the documentary film which launched in 2030, telling the stories of the Hafus living in Japan. This film tries to show to Japanese people that multilingual, multicultural is a cultural property, is not a trait. And the reception of this movie is quite good in Japan. Something that we can read as a hope that Japan will develop better in terms of acceptance of globalism and embracing multiculturalism and diversity. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Fitriana Puspita Dewi, for giving us such informative, interesting presentation. After we heard the presentation from the previous speaker, now I can wait to introduce you to our next speaker. He's a member of the Faculty of Humanity in Universitas Indonesia. He graduated from Graduate School of Global Studies, Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. Today he will speaking about Japanese football expansion to Southeast Asia. That is relevant to our topic in today's conference. He will tell us about how football bridges the friendship between Japan and Southeast Asia countries and discuss the implication of it from a cultural perspective. Therefore, his presence at today's program is very worthy of our gratitude. Now, allow me to welcome the speaker, Mr. Himawan Pratama, to deliver his presentation. Time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Neola. Can I please share my screen? Okay. Am I audible? Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, then. Please let me start my presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Himawan Pratama. As stated, I am a faculty member of the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. I'm also currently a PhD student at Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. Today, sorry, I will talk about Japanese football expansion to Southeast Asia. But before I begin, I want to ask the audience this question. What comes to your mind when you hear Japanese football? Japanese football. With the popularity of Japanese anime and manga, I assume that many of you are familiar with Captain Tsubasa and several other football manga. Perhaps some of you also followed Japan's national team's achievements in the FIFA World Cup, Women's World Cup, or in other international tournaments, which were widely reported by Indonesian media. Some of you might also have heard of the Men's Football League or the J League. The league grabbed Indonesian media's attention, particularly after the move of Pratama Arhan, Indonesian national team's player, to the second division J League club of Tokyo Verdy on April of last year. So, given these recent publications, I assume that many of you have a certain amount of information about Japanese football. However, I wonder if you have heard about the J League strategy to expand its market to Southeast Asian countries, including Indonesia. The strategy is named the Asia Strategy and has begun since 2012. In today's talk, I want to introduce the strategy as a case study for studying Japanese cultural industry's global expansion. Since my background is cultural studies, I would like to give an example of how to approach the strategy from a cultural perspective. Before discussing further about the J League's Asia strategy, please let me introduce my most recent research, which is my PhD dissertation. In my dissertation, I analyzed Japanese identity discourse within narratives of sports-themed popular culture. The aim of the research was to observe how Japan's position among other nations in sporting context is depicted in the stories of various popular culture works. For such purpose, I focused on analyzing portrayals of interactions between Japanese characters and foreign or non-Japanese characters in football and the Olympics-themed popular culture works of the Heisei era, which spanned from 1989 to 2019. Through such an analysis, I observed the prominence of European and South American others in Japanese football narratives. In many football manga released during the late 1980s to mid-2000s, narratives of the eagerness of Japanese young football players to learn from European and South American mentors were apparent in various forms. Such narratives are in line with the development of football in Japan at the time. The men's professional league, the J League, began in 1993. Many European and South American football stars were invited to play in Japan in order to lift the popularity of football. They were also expected to act as mentors so that Japanese players can level up their footballing skills. European and South American figures were also present in the national team with the coming of foreign managers from the early 1990s. At the end of this learning from Europe and South America processes, Japan's debut at the FIFA World Cup was achieved in 1998. In this period, the presence of European and South American mentors in football narratives is an important ingredient for crafting stories of Japan's journey from being an quote-unquote underdeveloped nation in football into an emerging powerhouse. From the latter half of the 2000s until the end of the 2010s, a shift in the positioning of European and South American others in football narratives surfaced. In this period, the national team of Japan has established its position as a regular participant in the FIFA World Cup. In 2011, the women's team even championed the 2011 FIFA Women's World Cup held in Germany. The J League has also established itself as one of the most competitive leagues in Asia. This claim is exemplified by J League clubs' strong presence in the Asian Champions League. Along with such football development, Europeans and South Americans continue to be depicted as the most significant others in narratives of various football manga. However, their position within narratives shifted from mentors who inspired Japanese players with their un-Japanese skills to figures who helped Japan in building its own football identity. So towards the end of the Heisei era, European and South American others thus played a significant role in constructing a more confident self-portrayals of Japan as a football emerging force who is in its pursuit of its football identity. The Heisei era ended in 2019 and was followed by the new era of Reiwa, along with the reign of Emperor Naruhito. Towards the end of the Heisei era, Japan faced various economic, social, cultural, and geopolitical challenges. In early 2010s, Japan's position as the second largest global economy in the world was taken over by China. In March of 2011, triple disasters, which included earthquake, tsunami, and the leak of nuclear plants, struck the Tohoku area in northeast Japan. These two major events shook Japan's reputation as an established industrial nation. Additionally, the consequences of Japan's declining population, which has started since the end of the 1980s, began to affect the country. From an economic perspective, many industries which previously relied on the domestic market started to consider strategies to expand the market overseas. This has been true in the case of Japanese popular culture industry. The Cool Japan strategy, for example, is an effort endorsed by the Japanese government from the 2010s in order to boost the economic potentials of Japanese products and services, including popular culture-related ones. In Indonesian case, the ease of access to Japanese popular culture-related products that we enjoy from mid-2010s are one of the examples of such strategy, which was born out of economic and socio-cultural circumstances occurred in Japan. These circumstances created the need to consider Asia as a potential market for Japanese products and services. In short, we can say that the end of the Heisei era was characterized by the growing interest towards Asia shown by various Japanese business stakeholders. Their interests are shown through active movements to expand the businesses to other Asian countries. In a similar vein, Japanese football stakeholders began to consider expanding to the Asian market from early 2010s. In 2012, the J League launched the Asia Strategy. As indicated by its name, the strategy aims at maximizing economic potentials of the Asian football market, particularly in Southeast Asian countries, through efforts in expanding the J League's fan base and from J League matches broadcasting rights. Additionally, the strategy aims at building the image of Japan as the leader of Asia in football, and J League's images as an ideal career destination for Asian players. Such aim embodies in the form of coaching clinics, exhibition matches between J League clubs and Southeast Asian clubs, and opportunities for Southeast Asian players to play in J League clubs. The Asia strategy is exemplified by the broadcasting of the J League in Thailand's television. Some of Thai players were also given the opportunity to have a footballing careers in Japan. Some of them, such as Tirasil Dangda, Tiratun Bumatan, and Chanatip Songkrasin, eventually succeeded in establishing their careers in the J League. These players successfully become important members of their Japanese clubs. In Indonesian case, Indonesia is also one of the target countries of the Asia strategy. As early as 2014, Irfan Bahdim kicked off Indonesian players' move to the J League by playing in the club of Ventrovet Kofu before moving to another club, Consadole Sapporo. In the same year, Stefano Lillipali had a year of his career playing also in Consadole Sapporo. And the most recent example is Pratama Arhan, who moved to Tokyo Verdy in April last year. As seen in various media, Arhan's move to Japan is celebrated by Indonesian football fans, media, and officials. Arhan's move has been described by many as a form of friendship between Indonesia and Japan. Along with these Southeast Asian players' move to the J League, the intensification of the J League related contents distribution to Southeast Asian market is apparent. The J League and its clubs transmit various contents through the media, including social media. The contents vary from documentations of players' daily activities in Japan or blog, match results updates, match live streamings, to stories of how football bridges the friendship between Japan and Southeast Asian countries. In Arhan's case, despite his very limited current playing time for his club, a significant number of contents portraying his activities in Japan have been produced by Tokyo Verdy. The majority of these contents are available also in Indonesian language, thus indicating the target market of the contents. As we might have predicted, Arhan-related contents immediately grabbed Indonesian football fans' attention. This can be seen in how Tokyo Verdy, despite its position in the second division of the league, instantly became the club with the most followers in Instagram and YouTube among other J League clubs after Arhan's arrival. Their contents now are usually full of comments from Indonesian accounts. From a business point of view, it remains to be seen whether or not the Asia strategy is an effective strategy. Arhan's current limited playing time has been harshly criticized by netizens. Some of them even commented that Arhan is invited to Japan as a mere quote-unquote brand ambassador. Such criticism might turn Indonesian football fans away from following the J League, which in turn might jeopardize the aim to build a fan base or market in Indonesia, as stated by the Asia strategy. Additionally, although Japanese popular culture products such as manga, anime, and video games are very popular in Indonesia, the country's football market is a very Eurocentric one. It is doubtful that the J League, with its relatively minor global reputation, could penetrate Indonesian markets' demands for European football. However, as someone from cultural studies, my focus is not on the economic side of the strategy, nor I have the capacity to forecast the future of J League's business expansion in Asia. As presented earlier, the Asia strategy aims at two targets, which are expanding the J League's market and creating Japan's leadership image in Asia through football. The latter, in other words, is related to the research topic that I have been doing, which is Japanese identity discourses in sporting context. As I explained earlier, my research observed the progression of Japanese identity discourse within sports team popular culture works during the Heisei era. In many works published in the first half of Heisei, self-identification as an underdeveloped footballing nation, which is eager to learn from Europe and South America, was apparent. In the second half of Heisei, the discourse shifted into a more confident one. Such discourse is exemplified by stories of efforts in constructing Japan's own football identity, These stories imply the self-positioning of Japan as a football emerging powerhouse that is ready to compete with European and South American nations. Through this research, I came into an understanding that in Heisei's football narratives, Asian others, not to mention Southeast Asian others, are given very limited role, if not none. As I also observe discourses in the mass media and official documents, I could argue that the minor presence of Asian others was one of the characteristics of Heisei Japan's football narrative. The Asia strategy can be seen as a new direction or development of Japanese identity discourse in the new era of Reiwa. As discussed, the strategy is heavily loaded with rhetoric of friendship with other Asian nations, which further imply Japan's image as the leader of Asia in football. Let's take a look at some of the examples of the rhetoric. This picture is captured from Tokyo Verdy's YouTube channel, along with the coming of Arhan. The channel created a series called Diary Arhan, Arhan's Diary. In the first episode, the series depicts Arhan's first day at Tokyo Verdy's facilities. As seen on the screen, the picture as well as the caption portray how Arhan's coaches show their caring attitude for Arhan. Similarly, in this picture, Arhan's respect for his mentor in Japan, in this case Tokyo Verdy's sports director, is depicted. Furthermore, on April the 5th of last year, Indonesia Fest was held on the day of Tokyo Verdy's match against Vegalta Sendai. At the event, supporters were introduced to some of Indonesian cultural forms, such as food and traditional dances. In the video, Tokyo Verdy supporters' enthusiasm for Indonesian culture is highlighted, as exemplified by the picture on the screen, which shows children carrying a fan colored red and white, thus implying the image of Japanese fans as the welcoming supporters. The last example is not directly related to Arhan's case, but was released around the period of Arhan's move to Japan. This was taken from J League's official YouTube channel, titled "A Bridge Through Football: How the J League Connected Japan and Southeast Asia." In the video, positive comments of the J League from Southeast Asian players who had the experience of playing in the J League are presented. On the screen, we can see Stefano Lillipali's comment on how the league helped him to be stronger. These comments imply the image of the J League as an ideal career destination for Southeast Asian players. Seeing from the implementations of the Asia strategy in recent times, what's striking from an identity discourse perspective is the inclusion of Asian others, especially Southeast Asian others, which previously were absent in Japanese football narratives. As in examples given earlier, Southeast Asian others inclusion helps building the image of Japan as the leader of football in Asia, as it enables self-portrayals of Japan as the caring mentors and role models for Southeast Asian players. Additionally, the J League image as the ideal career destination is also implied. To end my talk, I would like to give a critical perspective on J League's Asia strategy. As we know, generally Indonesians tend to perceive and respond to Japan or Japanese products in a very positive ways. Thus, it is understandable to see how the implementation of the Asia strategy in Indonesia are received in relatively positive receptions, particularly in initial phases of the of the implementation. However, on the other hand, excessive claims of leadership have the potential to develop into sensitive issues as they might trigger the remembering of other sides of Japan's relations with other Asian nations, such as the wartime memories. This comment concludes my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity and your attention. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Himawan. Ladies and gentlemen, now we open question and answer session. If all participants have a question, please raise your hand and say your name. Maybe you have a question to Ms. Fitriana or Mr. Himawan. Please raise your hand and say your name. Okay, Mr. Otman Marul. Please, your question.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like especially for Mr. Himawan, as we know that the culture of the Japan football is taking the benefits from at Stockholm. Because the quality of Japanese football is increasing over the few years backwards. And now, because the tragedy or the phenomenon of Arhan, so it means that the popularity of the Japanese football is getting increasing and it could be getting declined by the Indonesian side. And decided the competitor of the Japanese league is the current league. How, in your opinion, or maybe the research that you searched about it? The question is how the Japanese football could, could take lead and maybe find the best solution for facing the competitor Korean league. Thank you very much.
Okay, just it, Mr. Otman. If there are any question for Mr. Himawan. Okay, thank you, Mr. Otman Marolo. Next question is from Miss Ira Laura. Please say your question.
Okay, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunities. My question is for Mr. Pratama. Okay, the question is, I have two questions. For the first is, can you explain more about the terms of Leiwa? Because I don't hear it clearly, but it seems important to this discussion. And the second is, what is the benefit from the football expansion market? Because maybe because I don't really attracted by the football, so I don't have a clear, clear vision for what is the benefit for Japan itself for the football expansion market in Asia. Mostly, is it because to attract migrants or just for maintaining the leadership of Japan? Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Next question, please, Hemalia Kusuma. Hello, Hemalia Kusuma. Okay, maybe for next question, Seva. Please, Seva.
Okay, thank you, Pak Neola, for the time. I also want to thank you to Ms. Fitriana and Pak Himawan for the insightful presentation. It's actually interesting to talk about Japan in general, but I would like to specifically ask for Hafu. Is there any factors that contribute in making the Hafu feels like there are foreigners in their own country? And perhaps I would also ask for perhaps their ups and downs for being half Japanese and half other ethnic in Japan. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sefa. Maybe Mr. Himawan can answer from first and second question from Otman and Ira Laura.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I would like to address first Miss Ira Laura's question. First, about the Reiwa. So, if you're not familiar with Japanese calendar system, there are two systems used in Japan. The first one is the I'm not sure if I can say that if this is the converse the or I can say that the first system is the one that also used in Indonesia. So for example, this year is called 2023, right? But in Japan, there is also another way to refer to the year. As I said, the from 1989 to 2019 was referred to as the Heisei era or the Heisei period. This was when the Emperor Akihito was in his position as the emperor, and then starting from April of 2019, the new emperor reigned, Emperor Naruhito, and thus the name of the year also changed to Reiwa. So Reiwa it refers to that tradition of naming years in Japan based on the emperor. And then the second question about the benefit of Japanese football industry to expand its market to Asia, particularly to Southeast Asia. As I explained earlier, previously, Japanese football business mainly target domestic market. I mean Japanese market. However, due to the shrinking population, which also affect the economic potential of the domestic market, the needs to expand the business outside Japan emerged, especially since the beginning of 2010s. So yes, aside from the kind of ideological aim to build the image of Japan's leadership in Asia, the initial idea, I think, was to develop the business side of J League. Southeast Asia is particularly usually seen as a very potential market for Japanese football. First, because of the general very positive receptions from Southeast Asian audience for Japanese products, and also as we know, the enthusiasm for Southeast Asian football fans for football, not only for European football, is also big. So the two combine in making the Southeast Asian market as the very potential market. Yeah, I hope these answer your question. And secondly, I would like to address Pak Otman Marolov's question. As you said, some of Indonesian players had the opportunity to have their careers in South Korea also. Thus, we can see a kind of competition between the Japanese football business and the South Korean football business in Indonesia. I'm not sure which one now is capitalized more from Indonesian market. I still see that although Indonesian football fans are generally very enthusiastic about their players who are playing abroad, but in terms of the economic benefit enjoyed by the South Korean and the Japanese football businesses, I think they still need to wait a bit longer, as I think the economic side of football needs to be built in a more comprehensive ways. Now we can see the popularity of South Korean football in Indonesia, for example, in what's his name? Indonesian players playing in South Korea. His name is I forgot the name, but we can see in his club's YouTube how he has been actively playing the role as a brand ambassador for Indonesia, for his club in Indonesia. The same case also can be seen in Pratama Arhan's case. So I think we still need to wait which business strategy is the most effective one. So I think I don't have the exact answer for the question, but I think in the near future we can expect more development of the economic sides of these two Asian football businesses in Indonesia. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Rimawan. Maybe Mrs. Fitriana can answer the question from Sheva.
Seva, okay. Thank you, Seva, for the question. We want to confirm, sorry, I off cam again, to reconfirm the question. You asked about the factors contribute how harmful feeling why they feel as foreigner in their own country, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mostly because their physical figure, right? That obviously not Asian. So Japanese see them as other entities, even though they're born and live in Japan, speaking fluent Japanese, but from the physical figure, oh, this maybe because the eyes, the age. So Japanese see them as others. And as example, about the prohibition in onsen or public hotbed, in the sign written is Japanese only, but actually like Hafu ASEAN or Hafu Korean, they can enter because they can accept it too, and they can enter the onsen because they're physically similar to ASEAN or Japanese. And then maybe another factor is about in Japanese culture there is a uchi soto concept. Uchi means inner or inside. It's about Japanese people, and soto means outside. It refers to anything outside Japanese people. So this concept differentiates society. So everything that look distant from Japan, everything doesn't have a value same as Japan. Everything that doesn't consider as inside for Japan, it can still see as other or soto from Japanese people view, and this concept still exists until today. Maybe yeah, this is my opinion. Sefa, how about it?
Okay, thank you, Miss. Okay, thank you, Miss Fitriana.
Okay. Yeah, hello Himawan. Yeah, Himawan is my junior in my master program. Sorry. Congratulations for graduation. You only graduate, yeah? From
Yeah, I almost finished my.
Almost finished. But
iya, terima kasih Kak Fitri.
Reunian di sini.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Himawan and Mrs. Fitriana.
Yeah.
From this, we can conclude that from what the social interaction that are taking place by Hapu at this time, seeing the challenge and the opportunity experienced by Hapu in Japan, the existence of this minority group break the understanding of Japanese nation, which consists of homogeneous society. And globalization allow the movement of people from one place to another with various different factors. The existence of this Hapu can make Japan a multicultural nation. And from what Mr. Himawan said, we can see how the G League was able to become the #1 league in Asia and internationally. From here, we can see the G League is so popular and effective. From the G League, it can pick Japan's relation with various countries. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of this seminar. Before I close the seminar, I would like to thank you for two speakers, Ms. Titiana and Mr. Himawan, and for all participants. Thank you very much. Now I bring the event to MC to Mrs. Fiona. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Titiana and Mr. Himawan for such wonderful and insightful presentations. Also, thank you, Mr. Neola, for moderating this second session. It went really well. Now, we have passed all the sections in this webinar, but I think we forget one thing. We haven't yet taken a picture together. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn our camera on and take a good pictures. Our committee will help us with the documentation. Sefa, are you here?
I'm here.
All right, take it over.
Okay. Thank you, Fiona. Everyone can turn on their camera. And I'm going to start from the first slide. 3, 2, 1. And the next slide. 3, 2, 1. Moving on to the third slide. 3, 2, 1. Next slide. 3, 2, 1. And the last one. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shefa, for taking pictures. Now, guys, it's time for the best questions announcement. Are you guys ready for it? All right. For the first sessions, congratulations for Felicia Iona. And for the second one, congratulations for Ira Laura. Yay! All right, we will contact you guys right away after this webinar ends. Once again, congratulations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of this webinar, but don't worry because we still have the next section that will be started at 1 p.m. on this same Zoom room after we have a little break after this. So finally, to wrap up this first section, I would deliver our gratitude to the Honorable Mrs. Melly Noviriani S. SOS MMA, Head of the International Relations Study Program, the Honorable Mrs. Misako Kono, Assistant Director of the Japan Foundation, Sir Professor Dr. Abdul Hakim MSE, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Brawijaya. Last but not least, thank you to all the committee and also the participants for attending the second Brawijaya Undergrad Student Conference, Brausc. So don't forget to come back. See you guys.